I was writing a book about glue, but I got stuck on the first chapter. Hey, it's Joey. From artifacts to zombies, the Commander format of Magic the Gathering contains a bazillion different deck archetypes, umbrella terms that will help clue you into what that deck is about. Life gain decks, for instance, gain a lot of life. Enchantress decks contain a bunch of enchantments. Very complicated system. But call me crazy, I've always felt a little bit unsatisfied by this labeling convention. While those names might be helpful in terms of telling you the contents of a deck, they don't actually tell you very much about that deck's commander. After all, Tatyova, Omnath, and Omo are all lands decks, but the way that they each play is extremely different. Like, if they were all bank robbers, they wouldn't have interchangeable roles. They are each specialists. One is the muscle, one is the safecracker, and the other is the getaway driver. You tell me which one is which. To me, calling something an enchantress deck, or a dinosaur deck, or even a hipster deck, or a budget deck, is more like mentioning the cast list of actors that you can expect to show up in the movie, rather than telling you that movie's genre. Like, if it is a landfall deck, I can probably assume that it'll star the likes of Scoot Swarm and Rampaging Bailouts and Meryl Streep, of course. But I don't know if it's going to be a drama or a comedy. It's only when I find out that the Necrobloom is the director that I realize, yeah, this one's going to be a tearjerker. So that's why I'd like to take you through some new categories, a new system that we can use to think about our own commanders in a way that does tell us more about that deck's genre, and not just about its cast of cards that you're likely to see during the show. These categories aren't about broad archetypes, but rather about the function the commander fulfills. And this also isn't just going to be fun labeling for the sake of labeling. I actually think this is a really big way to improve your game. Your commander is a huge counterweight that affects all of the other cards in your 99, so understanding how it and other commanders like it all function will help you figure out its most common play pattern, the weaknesses that they have in common, the most optimal time to play them, elements like that are vital to becoming a better player and a better deck builder. I sorted through a ton of commanders and found that they largely break down into about 10 different categories of design. Very internet-friendly number. When a new commander comes out, you can bet that it will probably fulfill one of these 10 roles when you build around them. And yes, a lot of commanders multi-class into several of these categories at once, but understanding what their jobs are and which one of those jobs is the most important to you is the ultimate key to becoming a better deck builder. More on multi-classing at the end of the list. 10 categories is a bunch, so no more ado, let's hop to it. Number 1, card advantage, or card draw and velocity. We're starting with a couple obvious ones before we get to the more esoteric types. Resource accumulation is an all-important aspect of commander gameplay, and card advantage sits as king among them. These commanders believe that the more options you have, the better off you'll be. Think of commanders like Tatyova, Ishtola, Shorakai, Sithis, or Queen Marchesa. Though they do have some other benefits attached, these commanders share a primary payoff in common. When you do the thing, they let you draw. Some of these commanders draw cards in a measured pace, but others are such powerful value engines that they will offset the density of other spells in your deck. After all, why play a Harmonize to draw cards when Tatyova will let you draw 3 from just playing a good ramp spell, right? However, this also puts a big spotlight on these commanders. If they're removed early or consistently, you don't just lose out on tempo, but you'll also lose out on a huge amount of card flow, which is often very detrimental. If your commander gives you a lot of cards, then it's probably the kind of commander that you need to protect a lot. Now, I know we commander players often like to simplify to phrases like card draw, but we should try to be more technical here and be more proper about calling this card advantage or even card velocity, because this can take many different forms. The new Marilyn, for instance, gets cards from other players' libraries that she can then cast, and Lelia does a form of what we call impulse draw. All those cards don't end up in your hand, but you are getting access to more stuff that you can play, and that's card advantage, plain and simple. Or my Vohar deck, that's a looter, just draws and discards, so I don't end up with more cards in hand, but I am getting card velocity, because Vohar pitches creatures into the yard and helps me dig for the reanimator spells in my deck, which is really freaking awesome. Deck list below for those who are curious. So yes, card draw, card velocity, card advantage, this is an extremely common type of commander design and a very important staple of the format. Number 2, mana accelerators. Again, no surprise here. If the first type was card advantage, then the next one is going to be about mana. These commanders don't find you more stuff, they just help you play it faster. Consider here Marwyn, Kalia, Giada, Animar, and yes, Vivi Ornithir. Some of these will literally give you more mana to cast your stuff, but acceleration doesn't just mean giving you mana outright. It could also mean discounting your costs, like Animar does, or cheating around those costs altogether, like Kalia. At the end of the day, what these commanders do is get stuff into play a lot faster than if you had just been playing out your lands normally. These commanders are extremely good, but they often share a typical weak point. overextending. Getting your stuff into play more quickly usually means that you're the immediate main character of that game, so the first board wipe probably has your name on it. If your commander gives you a mana boost, I would recommend that you pack more card advantage into your 99, or more protection spells, or both. That way you don't play out your whole hand, get board wiped, and then get stuck top decking for the whole rest of the game. I applied that philosophy to my Barakos deck, a commander that makes me a bunch of treasures, huge mana boost, and all of the extra protection spells that I have in that list are what keep that deck from puttering out. They allow me the breathing room to actually figure out how it is that I'll take all of that fuel and transition my early lead into a proper endgame. Another possible weak point of mana accelerator commanders is that they sometimes can get worse over the course of the game. Belby, for instance, can make a ton of mana super fast, but if the game goes too long, then opponents will start to catch up, and you'll lose the benefit of such an early boost. That isn't always going to be the case. The new Zimone Infinite Analyst can give you such a huge discount on your X spells that she is just as relevant in the late game as she is in the early game, but it still could happen that other opponents will start to catch up with you. So just be aware that your commander could start to get a little bit weaker over time compared to other players whose commander types might get more potent as the game goes long. Now, I mentioned this before, but keen viewers may already be noticing that, hey, couldn't some commanders fit into multiple of these categories? Aren't some commanders multiclassing? And yes indeed, multiclassers are in fact the whole reason that I made this video in the first place, but we've got to get through the full list first, so stay tuned. Alright, card advantage and mana acceleration are pretty important, but also pretty obvious categories, so now let's get to some of the cool ones. Number 3, the Force Multiplier. The Force Multiplier is low-key one of my favorite types of commander. It doesn't necessarily bring a unique new thing to the table, but rather it just amplifies what you already want to do. Force Multiplier commanders include legends like Teysa Karlov, doubling your death triggers, Yarok the Desecrated, doubling your ETB effects, Adrix and Nev making extra tokens, Katara the Fearless squeezing more value out of your allies, or Kilo Apogee Mind proliferating all of the counters that you've already got. These legends don't invent something for your opponents to worry about. In fact, they don't do anything on their own. They just take what you're already doing and supercharge it, sometimes by a little, and sometimes by so much that it will win the game. These are basically the doubling seasons of commanders. This is the most commander agnostic category by a country mile. While other commander types might need the whole deck to orbit around them, these Force Multiplier and Amplification commanders might not even need to be used at all for you to still win the game. I've won plenty of games with my Thalise Reverent Medium deck without ever once casting her because the rest of the deck was just making enough tokens already on its own. Or I've played against Ulalek decks that never needed to get Ulalek out to double the Eldrazi's and their triggers because the Eldrazi's that were already in play were just regular raffle stomping us. The real superpower of Force Multiplier commanders is their relationship to enemy removal, because they often put your opponents into hilariously difficult positions. Do I kill that thing that is attacking me, or do I kill the Felix 5 boots that is going to double up that thing's trigger? Like, contrast the reactions here. My Babala Saga deck is an extremely commander-centric deck, and if someone does sniper, I am devastated. That really slows me down and screws me up. But if someone does snipe your Felix 5 boots, for you, that ends up being a minor setback at best. The rest of your deck is still going to be humming along just fine. However, while this type of commander can be very exciting, be aware of its potential pitfalls too. Their amplification is very strong, but if there is no force for them to multiply in the first place, then these commanders literally don't do anything when they're on their own on the battlefield. Plus, since they're not providing any of the crucial aspects of a deck's typical engines, mana acceleration or card flow or independently making you tokens, things like that, that means that the rest of your 99 has to carry all of that weight. So finding a good opening hand that contains a good number of lands and mana acceleration and card draw and removal and the enablers and the ingredients that you need, that just gets a little bit harder when your commander isn't able to help you out in any of those areas. So basically what I'm saying is that if you have a Force Multiplier commander, make sure you practice your mulligans properly. Try also to practice your timing. These commanders often will double up on your value, but sometimes that means that you have to take a turn off now to make a future play better, rather than playing a card that will get you a benefit right away. You won't always have the breathing room to deploy one of these commanders without the rest of the table punishing you for that. Figuring out when and when not to make that pit stop will be key to your success. Number 4, the Linchpin, or the Tentpole commander. These are the exact opposite of what we just talked about. Force multiplier commanders will enhance what you already have, but you can sometimes take it or leave it whether or not they stay in play. Whereas a Linchpin commander, that is the axis upon which your entire deck spins. If they get KO'd, your whole deck is just dead in the water. Think of Omo, Queen of Vesuva, Feather the Redeemed, Bello, Bard of the Brambles, Obeka, Brute Chronologist, Yurlok of Scorched Thrash. These commanders are practically on-off buttons. If they're in play, things are going well. If your opponent removes them, your deck halts in its tracks. Omo needs to be in play for it to grant the every creature type and every land type ability. If Obeka isn't there to end the turn and dodge your downsides, your spells suddenly become active liabilities in your hand. Basically, your commander is the host of the party, so if it doesn't show up, none of the other cards in attendance will have anything in common to talk about with all of the other guests. And yes, you guessed it, Voltron commanders are huge here. They're one of the biggest populations within the Tentpole commander category. All the auras and equipment in the world don't do anything unless your Ural the Miststalker or Wylith or Dogmeat are wearing them, you know? These commanders are the glue that was holding everything together, and it will fall apart without them. Many other commander types are reasonably hampered by removal, but none is so catastrophically ruined by removal as the Linchpin commander. You know, if some mana-making commander gets swept away in a board wipe, that deck will be slowed down, but it can still play the game. Whereas the Linchpin, removal might just end their run right then and there. Especially pin down removal like Imprison in the Moon or Darksteel Mutation. Those are practically silver bullets to this type of deck. A Linchpin or Tentpole commander also regularly has very few backup options that it can even rely on. You know, without Bello, the Sorcerer's Apprentice will not animate any of the brooms. Without Ural, no other card in your deck is going to be able to do commander damage. These commanders are glass cannons. Fun, but fragile. Take very special care of them. Alright, number 5, the removal. Not removal magnets, I mean removal. These are not the lightning rods that draw a bunch of attention, they're the lightning itself, sniping and stopping and stalling out other people's plans. Here's where we find legends like Judith, Carnage Connoisseur. Giving all your spells Death Touch means that you can really easily wipe the board every single turn by dealing 1 damage to each creature. Rakdos the Showstopper, Thanos snaps the entire board. Toxrill shrinks enemy fields into oblivion. The Reaper King nukes enemy permanents. Child of Alara throws a tantrum and then everything dies. It's not just that these commanders make removal a little easier or reward you for playing removal. Rather, these are the commanders where the whole point of them is to say the word no. I don't mean this as a judgment, I promise. What I'm about to say is not me assigning any moral weight to anyone who brews or is fond of these commanders and their respective playstyles. I fucking hate these commanders, and if you play them, you probably eat shoes for breakfast. No, okay, I'm kidding. You probably only eat sandals. But yeah, this type of commander is meant to mess up your opponent's plans, and they're very good at it, which is why they rile me up. So, job well done, really. There are a lot of commanders where if they get to do the thing, then they could win the game. But if these commanders get to do the thing, it means that someone else's stuff is about to get messed up. These commanders definitionally do not advance the board, they forestall it. Games with these commanders are the most likely to run long, not just because of the nature of removal, but also because of the sword of Damocles that they place upon the board and how that warps everyone else's tempo too. When you're constantly worried that Asmarana Martika Dyson Ocultikar is about to make your creature blow itself up, you have to be a lot more careful and precise and tank on your moves more often. You have to figure out when it is that it would ever be safe to deploy your creature again. Or Zakama Primal Calamity has 3 different abilities that all nuke stuff, you know? And that deck makes more mana than Taylor Swift has private jets. So seriously, what artifacts or enchantments or creatures could I get into play that will stick around? This inevitably affects the tempo of the entire game when that is sitting there in the command zone, looming over the entire field. I advise commander decks of this variety to have win conditions that are pretty quick when you deploy them. Like if ever there was a time that you'd be happy to see an infinite combo end the game, it's here. Better a combo ends the game quickly than us being stuck for several more rounds of top decking and no one being able to stick anything meaningfully in play, and the end of the game feels like a foregone conclusion, but we're all just biding our time until it finally arrives. Also, there's a big social cost here. These commanders are highly likely to become the archenemy because other people will want to do their stuff, and you are the obvious roadblock stopping them from doing it. You will be considered the villain. It's pretty hard to deflect deflect from that reality. And in fact, be warned, your removal engines might be effective against player A's big creature strategy, but will they be as effective against player B's treasure strategy or player C's spellslinger strategy? Other savvy players might actually be able to take advantage of the fact that you have done the removing a bunch of problems job for them. Now they don't have to worry about all of those other things getting in their way, but you have taken on the social cost of being the villain who removed all that stuff. So watch out, other players could seize upon the opportunities that you create in the game. All right, we're halfway through the list, but I'm going to take just a quick pause here to let you know some important stuff very briefly. First, for those that missed the recent channel update, please see the video linked in the description for full details. Second, this show is brought to you by you, the fantastic patrons at patreon.com/joeydh. There are new tiers, new perks, and patrons have already been updated about all of that. Many of the perks did in fact stay the same, like the Discord and exclusive content, but there are some new things over there now too, so you can go ahead and check that out if you fancy. And just thank you so much, everyone. This has been a really big change, and I just can't believe how wonderful you all are. And as one quick final note, just full transparency here, with a job shift like this, just looking on the practical life side of things, it is possible that I'll end up adopting a release schedule that is a bit more similar to some other Magic YouTubers may know, like my friends Elk or Salubrious Snail, who I'm actually very eager to start collabing with very, very soon. But yeah, just another heads up that I felt was important to establish. All right, that's all done. Back to the list. Number 6, the Payoff Commander, or I like to call it the Capstone. All right, this is the big one. The Capstone Commander is one of, if not the final card that you play in the game. They require a ton of setup and extremely careful timing, but you play them on the turn where you're making your final move. These are the payoff, these are the win con. I've sometimes described my Sir Conrad deck as mono black Jetmir, and this is why. Conrad and Jetmir will see a full board of creatures and turn them all into damage. I only cast the Mimeoplasm when it's a lethal combination of creatures. I'd include Bruna here too. She still needs to attack to get her trigger, but you don't cast her for value. You play her when you have boots for haste and counterspell backup and a big hand or a big graveyard that's about to slam 10 auras onto her at once, and therefore reduce one of your opponents to nothing but a charred silhouette and an empty pair of shoes. And you know what? I'm also including combo commanders in this section too. If your commander is one half of a combo like Heliod with Walking Ballista, that's another win con in the command zone, and that's the reason it's there. Importantly, this is the most telegraphed playstyle in the entire freaking world. A Jetmir in the command zone is like publishing fanfiction. Everyone automatically knows a lot of very specific details about you now. Not only do they know exactly what to expect, they will also know exactly when, where, and why to hold up their interaction to stop you and your super obvious big looming threat commander. This is going to make timing a lot more difficult on your end. Something that I recommend doing to just try and take some of the heat off of your commander is to play some other final win con cards in the list too. Just a couple of other options for that last push of damage, or even alt win con cards entirely. I think that these can be helpful to subvert your opponents, since they'll have prepared to stop your mega obvious commander, but it can sometimes be possible that they're so focused on that option that you playing another win con card could blindside them. This also might be a tricky type of commander to identify at first, because often these commanders could be built in different ways. The Mimeoplasm could be played as just a good value piece, right? Or Dina Soulsteeper could be just a nice life gain payoff, rather than being one half of an infinite life gain combo win condition. Do these commanders have to be built as win conditions? Not necessarily, but again, that's why this framework is important. When you decide that your commander is the win condition, that changes your deck. That changes the support system that those commanders need. It puts a ton of emphasis on your timing. It changes your relationship to sandbagging all of your spells. You might end up building the entire game towards a single window of opportunity. So if that's the case, don't blow it. Number 7, the setup/enabler. If the previous category was the payoff, then this category is the setup. This is one of the more popular types of commander designs. These commanders will provide a unique and usually consistent turn-by-turn effect that will slowly help you incrementally shift the tides in your favor. I'm talking commanders like Emara, Soul of the Accord, providing you an extra token when she's tapped, Olero, Ageless Ascetic, slowly gaining you life, the Wise Mothman, rad counters and +1 counters, Sephiroth, going through the dungeon, and I'd also wager that probably every single Planeswalker commander ends up living in this category too. Each one of them has a somewhat minor but very meaningful ability that inches open new doors and game pathways for you. They don't do a sudden burst, and they aren't a final flourish, they're just a steady trickle that you can use to set up the dominoes that will later come crashing down on your foes. Like I said, this type of commander is extremely common. Frankly, if you don't have one of these types of commanders in your roster, I'd be kind of surprised. And I like the back and forth punchy, begin to snowball gameplay that these types of commanders tend to produce. Setup Setup or enabler commanders won't make themselves the main character of every single game quite as often as some other commander types will, and that can sometimes allow them to fly under the radar, which means that they're more likely to get to do the stuff that you want them to do. However, it's worth noting that value isn't victory. Setup commanders usually make like one thing at a time, not a bunch of things at a time, so they need time to cook. At their worst, they can actually sometimes even drag a little bit. Slow and steady wins them the race, but they definitely will need help to actually win a game. If you're building these, you should be making a very conscious effort to include finale-style oomph cards in your list that will help you bring the house down. You know, Sephiroth can get a lot of good value from the dungeon, but just nickel and diming your opponents is not going to be the thing that ends the game. Even the occasional reanimation that deck is capable of is not going to win the game. That can be slow, so you probably want other cards that will help make your deck aim towards something more impactful. Helpfully, these commanders are not ruined by a board wipe. They can recover pretty okay from them, but it is just, I don't know, a little bit of a pain. Like, they will get the ball rolling again, that's not a problem, but they will do it by, again, just that one small thing at a time. They're not going to come bursting back out of the door like our next category often does. Enabler commanders help you to establish a foundation that your deck will then be able to build upon. I honestly think that these are some of the most fun commanders to have at any table, and they're some of the coolest ones to watch do the thing. Number 8 is the burst, or the mid-range. You know how in volleyball they have bump, set, spike? Well, the enabler commanders we just discussed are the bump, and the capstone/payoff commanders were the spike, but these are the set in between those two modes. These are the commanders that help you to pivot from the early developmental stages of the game into your preparation for the end game. These are commanders like Gishath, Sun's Avatar, Ziatora, Omnath Locus of Rage, Beledros Witherbloom, or Ovika Enigma Goliath. Each of these commanders will provide you with such a huge amount of value that it will make your opponents ask for their brown pants. These commanders don't arrive right away, they need a little bit of preparation before they can get onto the field, but once they do, if you untap with them, even just one turn on the field will start to spell doom for the whole table. You might have noticed that a lot of the examples I named here have pretty high mana costs, and that is pretty common for mid-range commanders, I think. But not always. Like, Baitor Kin to All is only 5 mana, but it needs enough toughness already in play for it to do anything. Batteries not included, some assembly required. You don't cast Baitor ASAP, you play it when you're finally ready to exit the developing stage of the game because you did the legwork it asked of you. These aren't like the enabler commanders, which want to be some of the first cards that you play. They help you to create a board, they provide that nice trickle of value that helps the rest of the deck begin to work. A spot of life gain here, a token made there, stuff like that. No, the mid-range commander doesn't do one thing at a time, they'll more likely do a burst of things as soon as they've arrived. Ovika, for instance, doesn't make 1 or 2 tokens, she makes a dozen. But they're also not like capstone commanders, which are the final card that you play, converting a board you already have into a lethal turn. No, mid-range commanders help you to make a board in the first place. Omnath Locus of Rage is going to create all of the angry jelly beans. Capstone commanders are like that deal with me right now or else, but a mid-range commander is the you should probably deal with me pretty soon. They're not the final play, they just help you get to the final play. 1 turn on the field alone is not going to win the game, but 2 or 3 turns could. A nice after effect here is that of those 3 types, bump, set, and spike, or enabler, mid-range, and payoff, this type of commander I think recovers the best from setbacks compared to the other 2. Enabler commanders can recover by starting all over again with their trickle of value, which is decent, but mid-rangers, they provide the burst to get back in. If my board got wiped, that's a bummer, but Maelstrom Wanderer will just bring me a new board right away. Whereas the capstone commanders, the payoff, they were building towards just one window of opportunity, and if they mess that up, they might not ever get another shot at winning the game. And mid-rangers don't have that problem either. This is another of the most crazy fun types of commanders in the whole format. If you haven't built around them before, I really recommend it. In my opinion, this type of big stompy stuff is exactly what the whole format has always been about. Coming up near the end, at number 9, we've got the Protector Commanders. This is a more obscure one. There aren't a ton of commanders like this, but they're still an important category to be aware of. Protector Commanders do exactly what they say on the tin. They keep your cards safe. Or if they can't protect outright, they'll provide you with an exit strategy that might be even worse than if your opponents had just let you be. Some Protector legends that come to mind here are Shalai, Voice of Plenty, gives your whole team hexproof. Pramikon shuts down a huge part of the combat step to keep your life up. Tam, Mindful First Year, practically a mother of runes in the command zone. Athreos, Shroud Veiled, helping yourself come right back. Or Linvala, Shield of Seagate. It really makes your opponents grumble when you have a heroic intervention-ish type of option available in your command zone at all times. These commanders are straightforward, they keep your stuff around, but an interesting byproduct of them is that a lot of commanders will qualify for Protector status, even though the way that people build around them often involves weaponizing that protection. Avacyn, Angel of Hope famously gives your board indestructible, which leads plenty of folks to build it in a way that regularly wipes the board, or even all lands, while leaving all of your stuff untouched. Or Felisa will leave a butt ton of Inklings behind if you wipe her board, but some Felisa players will just manipulate that themselves. Sometimes the best offense is an incredible defense, and these commanders prove it. I think these commanders are the most funny because of how they affect enemy removal. Like, if I know that my Path to Exile won't work on your creature because your commander will save it, then I end up being more likely to want to point my removal towards one of our mutual enemies instead so that my spell actually does something. That can end up buying you a little bit more time. But be warned, that does also sometimes mean that people may end up building multiple pieces of removal in their hand so that they can cut through your defenses and actually properly deal with you all in one big turn. Also, I've got to say it, if you play these legends, you do have to kind of be prepared to get kicked while you're down, and possibly also to even be ganged up on a bit. For instance, the new Selesnya Storm commander, who says flying creatures can't hit you, and the deck is designed to give your enemy creatures flying, so that they can't hit you. If her walls get up, you won't ever be able to attack this player. So people have to attack you in the few windows where they can, because if you get set up, you'll be immune from that forever. They have to kick you when you're down, because there's no other time to kick. The whole table may end up banding together to take down your fortress. Protector commanders are frankly very, very strong. When your opponents aren't able to successfully deal with your stuff, that is a great position to be in. But an interesting byproduct of them is that the Protector commanders do also end up playing the most paranoid. They can never feel completely secure. They can never truly rest on their laurels. And that's a pretty fun dynamic to explore. And finally, number 10, the Toolbox. Some commanders don't exist for their own sake, but rather for the sake of something else you've got in the 99, grabbing you any of the tools that you may end up needing in the moment. Both versions of Sisay find you legends to put into play. There's an Iron Man who finds you artifacts. Rocco tutors up a creature. Yisan and Prime Speaker Vanifar do the same. These are all commanders that will find you the thing that you most need. Sometimes that could just be an answer to a problem that's right in front of you, but also sometimes they could grab you something that will give you more card draw, or grab your win condition, or a combo piece. Now sadly, I must inform you that unfortunately, Henzi Toolbox Torre is not actually a Toolbox commander. It is indeed a sad day. This is in fact why we can't have nice things. A Toolbox deck could mean a commander that tutors, but also some hyper-modal commanders could fit this bill too. For instance, Kenrith or Mercil are really well known for being potential combo outlets, but they could also just theoretically exist in that same Toolbox type of way by providing a variety of effects and different options for you to use whenever a certain need arises in the moment. Toolbox commanders help you find the stuff you need, which is actually kind of similar in scope to the card advantage commanders we mentioned at the top of the list. Those are also commanders who provide you with access to more options. But I think the specificity is pretty crucial to understand the difference between those two. A card advantage commander will give you access to more options, which also lets you pivot and improvise on the spot. There's a lot of flexibility there. But a Toolbox commander, while it does seem to have that flexibility, I think it's important to note that they actually are honing in on one specific choice and kind of betting that that choice is the correct one for this moment. Here's your one chance, fancy. If things go wrong for that Toolbox player, that is more catastrophic for them than it would be for the card draw commander who has more options left over to help them recover from a setback. The trade-off here, though, is of course that the Toolbox commander is less likely to have things go wrong in the first place, provided of course that you're playing them well. And that's the list of the 10 categories that most commander designs tend to fall into. Card advantage, accelerators, force multipliers, linchpins, removal, enablers, mid-range and payoff, protectors, and toolboxes. Now, like I mentioned up top, not all commanders will fit into just one category each. Many commanders are actually multiclassers, as in they fit into multiple of these categories at the same time. Wizards of the Coast loves to put way too many words on commanders these days. I'd say that often commanders are multiclassing. So let's go through a couple of examples. So for instance, Tatiova provides card advantage, whereas Prosper Tomebound provides both card advantage and mana resources. You could say the same thing about Kadena Slinking Sorcerer. That discounts your morph costs and draws you cards. I would call both of these commanders card advantage and accelerator multiclassers. Or take Arcades the Strategist. This one I would call a card advantage and Linchpin multiclass. Arcades draws you cards when your defender creatures enter the battlefield, but also your board really needs Arcades to stay in play, or else your defenders can't attack. Without your commander in play, the deck will stall out, and it's hard to win the game. Kellen the Fae-Blooded is another cool example. This one I would call a Linchpin Toolbox. Kellen's adventure spell can find you whatever equipment you think you'll need, but also Kellen is your Voltron. It's double striking and racking up super important commander damage. Getting to some more popular ones, what about Toph the First Metalbender? Her I would call an enabler that's mixed with a protector. Earthbending your cards could be used to help loop them, or to save them from enemy removal effects later on. A Toph deck could definitely win without her, but she introduces a nice resiliency that you can either manipulate or fall back on as you need. Here's another popular one, Teval the Balanced Scale. This is a definite enabler commander, since it incrementally makes you zombie tokens as cards leave your graveyard. But also, Teval is clearly ramping you by getting more lands into play, so here we have an enabler that is also an accelerator. Be'lakor is a Grixis demon who wants to draw you cards based off of how many demons you currently have, so certainly a card advantage commander, but it also multiclasses as a very classic mid-ranger. You want to already have demons in play, but also the more demons that you play from then on, the more damage that Be'lakor's second burn ability will deal to your opponents. Alright, just a few more examples, and this is a really wild one, Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. I think this one's a force multiplier commander that's combined with the payoff category. Kinnan doesn't tap for mana on his own, but he does supercharge your other mana dorks. That's classic amplifier status. And Kinnan is part of a lot of infinite mana combos, while also being the payoff for those combos, because you can put all of that infinite mana into his activated ability, which players usually do to win the game. Gisela, Blade of Goldnight, is hilariously a protector and a payoff commander. She doubles your damage, so she could be your top end to have your entire board take someone out the turn that you cast her. But also, she's a protector, halving your incoming damage, and I've seen her built as a control deck for exactly this reason. And finally, a kind of newer commander here, High Perfect Morkant shrinks your enemy boards a lot with all of the -1 counters and blighting that it does. But also, it can proliferate. So here we have a removal engine picking off enemy boards that's also a force multiplier, since you can proliferate all of your own beneficial counters whenever you need to. It might be helpful to consider these categories like the astrological signs of your commander, except unlike astrology, these categorizations actually will help you to understand their personalities. You know, this commander might be a card draw sun removal moon, or this commander is a mana accelerator mid-range rising. This deck didn't work because Mercury's in the microwave. I don't know. Point is, for commanders like that who are straddling the line, I hope this type of framework will be useful for you to figure out which part of your commander you want your deck to really prioritize. Because here's why it all matters. Take the new Naya commander, Cloud. This can give you treasures and or card draw if you meet his conditions. And which of those things you value the most will change your entire deck. If you care about the treasures more, you'll probably prioritize hitting Cloud's 7 power requirement. If you care about the card draw more, you'll prioritize putting more equipment onto multiple creatures instead of just onto one creature. Or if you prioritize the commander damage, that will also be completely different than either of those options. Each of those branching pathways changes which equipment you use and which other creatures show up in the deck, and so on. Or take Nekusar, drawing extra cards and pinging the board the whole time. Are you expecting to play Nekusar early and for it to stay in play for several turns? Or are you doing what most Nekusar players do nowadays and play it on the turn that you're going to cast a bunch of other wheels for one final blaze of glory? If so, you might only get one chance at that, and you can't really afford to squander it. Or look at it from this angle, is Nekusar your primary damage dealer in the deck because of the way that you've built it? Or have you loaded the deck up with other redundancies so that it's not the only card of its kind dealing damage when people draw? If he's the only draw damage dealer, that's a lot closer to being your linchpin, but if you have a lot of other redundancies, then he could be closer to a force multiplier role. The way you choose to build your deck will force a certain relationship with your commander, and being aware of things like whether your commander is one of a kind or one of many, or whether it's a crucial early game piece or a late game arrival, those will all be vital to succeeding with your commander deck. Many commanders multiclass, but figuring out which of their functions you value the most will help you to make more considered choices for your deck. And ultimately, that's the key to really good deck building. Tell me what you thought of the list. Do you think that these 10 categories are accurate? Do you have commanders that fit into this framework? And if so, how? Which ones? Or do you think that I missed a category of commander out there? Let me know in the comments. And before we go, let's challenge the stats on some over and underplayed cards. First up, Lockrust from the Discord blew my mind with this amazing pick for Celis decks. Moment of Reckoning is a 7-mana sorcery that lets you choose up to 4, and you can choose the same mode more than once. Either destroy an online permanent, or revive an online permanent from your graveyard to the field. This is a big cool spell in the first place, 7 mana, kill 4 things, or revive 4 things, or do 2 and 2, or 1 and 3, any type of combination. But Lockrust points this amazing thing out for Celis, the Mardu commander that says whenever 1 or more creatures enter from your graveyard, put a +1 counter on your entire team. Now, I thought that if one spell brings back multiple creatures, that would still count as just 1 or more creatures entering from a graveyard, so then Celis would just put 1 +1 counter on the team. But nope. Apparently, if you choose the revival mode multiple times on this spell, those each count as individual revivals. I double-checked this with Judge Chat. Lockrust, you're a genius. This is so awesome. I'm slapping this immediately into my own Celis deck. You're absolutely right that this card should show up in more than just 100 Celis decks right now. Thank you so much for this amazing challenge. And one more, also from the Discord, Ugly Fabio, crazy name, submitted a really cool one for Teval, Arbiter of Virtue. That's the one that gives your spells Delve, but you lose life each time you cast a spell. I really love this. Fabio notes that a super cool way to gain life back easily in this deck will be with fight spells, because this Teval has natural lifelink, so they really enjoy the card Super Combo. This is a green 2-mana sorcery that says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls, but it also has Replicate 2, so you can pay 2 mana multiple times to copy this spell multiple times. This is a one-sided fight. I think that might be called a bite spell, and the replicate costs, it turns out, can actually be paid with Delve. So you could pay a total of just 1 actual mana, and Teval will let you delve this spell, replicate it multiple times. You'll lose 2 life for casting it because of Teval's downside, but then your 6/6 lifelinking commander will deal a bunch of damage to a butt ton of creatures, and gain you a butt ton of life. This is wild. That is a huge burst of life gain for a deck that really needs all of that life to continue casting his awesome spells. Ugly Fabio, you're right. Only 24 of the 5,500 Teval Arbiter of Virtue decks playing this is definitely too low. This is beautiful. Those were awesome challenges, and thank you so much to the top tier patrons whose names you just saw on screen. If you want to support the show too, you can check out the cool perks at patreon.com/joeydh. That's JOEYDH. Thank you so much for tuning in. Poke those buttons that make YouTube happy if you had a good time, and bye for now.